All right, I'd like to walk you through the process of using a box modeling technique to model out a piggy bank. And as we're going to be doing this, we'll be working with some basic polygonal geometry. And we're going to be scaling faces and deleting edges and performing extrusions and so on and so forth. And this is a very typical process that you might use to approach a lot of models that you might be working on here in the future. So the first thing that I'm going to do is start with a cube. And I'll go ahead and draw this out in my grid. I'm not really super concerned, with the exact proportions of it as I draw it out, because I'm going to come over here to the polycube inputs that's found in my channel box editor. I'm going to select the width attribute and then shift select the height and the depth and enter in a value of 5. And so now that turns this into a perfect cube. Now additionally, I'm going to mess around with the subdivision width, depth, and height. Now the subdivision refers to the number of faces that exist on each side of this cube. So if I select all 3 of those fields and enter in a value of 3, you can see that it's gridded out each face basically in terms of 3 faces along the z-axis or along the y-axis and also along the x-axis. We get something that looks a little bit like a Rubik's Cube. Now, not exactly the most pleasant of shapes to model out a piggy bank, so I will right-click on this object and pull up this menu, and I want to go into the Select Edge mode. Now, I'm going to double-click on one of these edges that constitutes the upper corner of this box. And if I double-click on one, what it's going to try and do is select an entire edge loop. Now, we don't have a full edge loop right here. Unlike right here, full edge loop, because that row of edges runs all the way around the circumference of this object. But in this particular case, it stops here and here because it doesn't know exactly where it should go, whether it should go along the x-axis or whether it should go along the z-axis. And that's just fine, because I want to make that selection. And then I'm going to click on Edit Mesh and come down to Delete Edge and Vertice so that we end up with a little slope right there. Let's go ahead and do that with the 3 remaining corners. So I'll double click to select this, come over to the other side, hold down Shift and double click to select those 3, and then Shift and double click to select those on the other corners. Once again, click on Edit Mesh and come Edit Mesh, Delete Edge and Vertice. And there we go. I end up with something that looks like this. Now, I am going to right-click on the object again and go into Select Face mode. So I'll select this front center face and rotate around to the back side and Shift select the back center face. Now I will grab my Scale tool and I want to scale those out along the z-axis. All right, and I know it's a z-axis because it's the blue handle that corresponds with this little guide down here in the lower left-hand corner. All right, so I'm going to scale them out about that far. So now we're starting to depart from such a box shape and get something that's a little bit more of a pill-like shape. Now, currently I'm in a geometric view mode. If I press the number 3 on my keyboard, I'm going to toggle into a smooth preview mode, where what it's doing is it's calculating the averages of all the edges and all the vertices to try and smooth it out as best as possible. Now what this does is this approximates what would happen were we to subdivide the model without actually subdividing the model. Alright, so in the smooth preview mode, if I look at this object from the front, you can see it's a little flat along these 4 sides. We can fix that by clicking on this middle top face and the corresponding middle bottom face. And I'm going to scale those along the x-axis. So I'll scale them out just a little bit. And I'll grab this center face on the side and the corresponding face on the other side. And I'm going to scale them both along the y-axis. All right, and so now we have something that looks a little bit more like a chubbied up pill. I will press 1 on my keyboard now to go back into my more geometric view. And I'm going to grab this front central face. Now this time I'm going to click on this icon right up here in my polygon shelf. All right, this is the extrude option. And if I click on that and grab this blue Translate tool. I'm going to pull this out a little bit, and this will turn into the snout for our pig. So if I press 3 on my keyboard, you can see how, we've changed the contour. This will be the forehead coming down into the snout and going back into the body. But going back into object mode, it's just too round. All right? Pig noses, generally we identify them as being a little more flat. Now the reason why this is round is because, once again, it's just calculating the averages of these edges and vertices and so forth. If we insert more information, meaning if we insert more geometry or more edges, we can more or less control exactly how round and exactly how flat some of these edges end up being. So I'm going to click on the mesh tools right here and come down to the Insert Edge Loop tool, and you'll notice that it gives me kind of a split view. And we see the geometric view in wireframe, and we see the shaded view in smooth preview. But I'm going to click on this edge right here. It represents the depth of that extrusion. And if you click and hold, you can scrub that back and forth. I'll do that again. So I'll click on this, and you can tell that I'm holding because I have a dotted line. And if I scrub forwards and backwards, where I release is where it is going to reinforce that hardness. Now I'm going to put in another one, kind of going back a little closer to the face, but not quite as close to where the snout meets the face as with the front end of the snout. All right, so we have our hard edge right here in front, and it's a little less hard as it transitions back into the body. All right, the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to extrude out some feet. So I'm going to right-click on this object and go into Select Faces mode again. I'm going to select these 4 faces. Now I'm holding down Shift as I select them. That allows me to select a couple of faces simultaneously. I'm going to press 1 on my keyboard to get out of smooth preview mode, and I'm going to hit the Extrude button again. Now this time, instead of using the manipulator tool that comes with the Extrude feature, I'm going to simply grab my Translate or my Move tool over here in my toolbar palette, and I'm going to translate those down a little bit. Okay, now you notice the angles of the feet aren't really conducive for the piggy bank, and we can fix that as easily as grabbing the Scale tool and scaling along the y-axis. All right, so I'm going to scale that down to the center, and you can see that it's flattening those feet out. I'm going to just do that twice for good measure, so I make sure that these are perfectly flat. And if you want to bring them in a little more under the body, you can scale them in along the x-axis, rotate this around, and scale it in a little bit along the z-axis, like so. Okay. Now I'm going to click on the 4 viewport mode and then tap the space bar on the front view. Okay, because if I press 3, you can see it's rounding out those feet, sort of like how it was rounding out the front part of the snout. And just like the snout, we want the bottom of the feet to be flat, as if this were to be setting and conforming to the surface of a table or a desk. I'll press 1 on my keyboard, and while I'm still in in face select mode, I'm going to click and drag a selection that goes across both legs. Now I'm just going to go back into the 4 viewport mode and just take a look in the perspective view so that you can see exactly what all has been selected. Now the reason why we have all 4 selected simultaneously is because I'm going to insert essentially an edge loop through all 4 feet at the same time. But instead of using the Insert Edge Loop tool, we're going to use the Multi-Cut tool. So click on Mesh Tools, come down to Multi-Cut, and I'm actually going to click off to the side, all right, right over here in the grid in the negative space. I'm going to click and hold and drag. Now if I hold down Shift, this will snap to various angles. I'm going to drag it all the way across like so and release. Now essentially what that's done is that has put a cut through everything that's been selected. So if we come over here into the perspective viewport and look, that cut has gone through all 4 feet. So if I press 3 on my keyboard, now we have flat little piggy feet. All right, right-click on your object, go into Select Object mode, and I think we are ready to actually subdivide this model. Now, when we subdivide, what basically happens is Maya takes every four-sided face and it divides that up into four four-sided faces. In the case of a three-sided face like we have right here, it's going to take that three-sided face and divide it up into three four-sided faces. Right? This is done by clicking on this icon right here in the polygon shelf. All right, so just click on that once, and you can see that our mesh density has increased quite a bit. Actually, if I go out of smooth preview mode, you know, we can still see kind of the faceted contour, but it's you know, created this additional geometry based on the averages that we're talking about in the smooth preview mode. All right, now I'm going to right-click on the object and go into Select Faces, and I'm going to select these four faces right here, because those would be four faces that are just almost automatically right where we want them to be, that would make excellent ears. So with those selected, I'll go ahead and hit Extrude, and I'm going to take the multi-tool that comes with the Extrude feature, and I'm just going to grab that blue Translate handle, and I'm going to pull those out a little bit, like so. All right, now the tops of those ears are a little thick, and this tool won't totally achieve the effect that we're going for if we try and scale both of the tops of the ear simultaneously. So I'm going to have to do one at a time. So I'll select the two faces that correspond with this ear. I'll grab the Scale tool, click on the center, and just scale that down in a little bit. And let's do the same thing on the other side, and I'll just eyeball it. All right, so those two look about the same. So if I go into smooth preview mode, perfect, have little piggy ears there. I will select the object in object mode once again, and I am going to do one more subdivision, all right, by clicking on this smooth feature. And now we're going to create eyes and pig nose holes, all right. So I'm going to grab a couple of faces right here on the snout. So I'll grab those four, and I'll hit Extrude. And I'll use this multi-tool and push those nostrils in a little bit. Okay, I'll click on Mesh Tools, grab my Insert Edge Loop tool. Along that, those new faces that created the depth to those nostrils, I'll go ahead and insert some new edge loops. All right, so that when I go into smooth preview mode, it remains nice and crisp and not quite so fleshy and organic as we're getting over here in this opposite nostril. So press 1 to go get out of smooth preview. Okay. All right, there we go. I think that's looking good. Let's go ahead now and go back into Select Faces mode and go ahead and select two faces on the front of the pig to function as eyes. So I'll press 1, go out of smooth preview mode. With those two faces selected, I'll go ahead and extrude. And I'll pull those out a little bit. Click on Mesh Tools, grab your Insert Edge Loop tool, and I'm going to insert an edge loop a little closer to the face. All right, so that it maintains a little bit more of a hard edge where the eye transitions into the body. All right, so it'll create more of a little button eye as a result of that. Okay, the last thing that we're going to do is create a slot for the top of the pig. So I'll grab the Paint Select tool, and I'm going to right-click on the pig and make sure that I'm going to be paint selecting just the faces. If I hold down B as in brush and click and scrub back and forth, and I can increase the size of that selection. All right, I'm just going to grab as many faces as that kind of help dictate the size that the slot is going to be. I'll press Extrude and go out of Smooth Preview mode. I'm going to hit plus on my keyboard to increase the size of my tools. Minus will make the tools smaller. I'm actually going to scale them in along these axes right here. All right, and now I'll extrude it one more time. Use a blue Translate tool to push it down in. And the last thing that I'll do is I'll grab that Insert Edge Loop tool and insert some edge loops where I want to maintain those hard edges. Right click, go back into object mode, and there you go.